Today is March 15, 2012. My name is Moses Flores.
And my name is Jose Cisneros.
Today we are interviewing Ms. Toby Glover. So,
When and where were you born?
I was born in Dallas, Texas at Methodist Hospital on February the 14th, Valentine's Day, in 1952.
so where did you grow up through high school?
I grew up in Oak Cliff, so I went to Rosemont as elementary, and then Griner Junior, and then Sunset High School.
I see.
There were 6 kids in my family, and we were all going up the pipe, you know,
I see.
the same schools following each other.
What did you do after high school?
After high school, I went to SMU for about 2 years, and then I went to Texas A&M because I thought I wanted to be a vet. We always had horses and stuff like that as a kid. And so I went down there for a semester and decided I didn't want to do that. And then I auditioned for Six Flags, and they sent me to Georgia to sing in the show at Georgia. So I moved to Georgia. And a few years after, I went back to school. I went to Georgia State University for a couple of years as an opera student. And then my teacher told me one day, you know, you're getting too old, because I was 24. You're getting too old, so if you want to sing for a living, you need to go up to New York. And I did. And I sang in New York City for a couple of years, and then I put together a band, and we toured for about 8 years. So I was a singer for about 10. Came home, went back to Atlanta, and back to school.
I see.
Okay, so can you please tell how were you informed that John F. Kennedy would be at the plaza?
Well, you know, they published the route, the parade route, which is insane today. Many things about this are absolutely, and some of it I think they learned from this experience, of course. But they would not publish the parade route, you know, unless it's an inauguration and you know where they're going to go. I came from an abusive home. And abusive in that my dad was not a pedophile, he was a sociopath. He created his own level of reality. And on his plane of reality, things were okay that are completely inappropriate for us. It's kind of how he justified being mean. He was cruel to people.
He had his own reasons. Or
He made a lot of money, and he just decided that he didn't have to operate by anybody's rules. He had money, and he had what he could do, and he kept marrying young women and having babies until he was about 70. But it was a very tough place for me. I was the youngest, and my parents divorced when I was 6, and in the 50s that was a big bad thing. You didn't tell anyone your folks were divorced. I couldn't tell the school. My sisters were like, don't you dare tell them. So I was very scared of my dad. And the only reason I go into this for any detail is so that you know that the kid who got there was a really disturbed kid to start with. I carried a lot to that position. And I had seen, my family, my dad's company made parts for aircraft, General Dynamics, Boeing, that kind of thing. And during Vietnam, they needed a lot of planes, so he made a lot of money. And they all were for Nixon because they were war kind of folks, made warplanes. So.
pro-war.
So they all voted for Nixon. And my next door neighbor was a Catholic family, and of course they had Kennedy's thing, a sign out front. We had Nixon. But after that was over and he was elected, pictures started coming out of him and his kids. Him, playing with them, driving them in a golf cart all around, sailing with them, pictures of him with dogs and horses, and he had his kids in the Oval Office, and he became, for me, the perfect father. Not perfect, but the good father.
I see.
That's what a good father looks like. That's what, I should have, and I don't. Very much don't. So my delusion was that if I could see him, things would be better at home.
Oh.
If he looked me in the eyes, I was saved. I would not have to go back to the horror. I would not have to do it. All of that would be removed because he would know I was alive. And he is the good guy. So I don't know how I thought it would happen, but I just had convinced myself that if he looked me in the eye, whew, my life was going to change completely. So we heard that he was coming, and I started immediately on my mother, begging her and begging her. She was a very sweet lady. She was hilarious too. But anyhow, I'm begging her, and finally the school system came out and said, we won't count you absent on that day because it's an educational thing if you want to go to the
I
parade.
see.
Well, once they said that, I was, Mom, it's not even, I'm not even going to miss any school. So she said, okay, if you will go to school, I'll come at 11 o'clock and pick you up. Because the parade was supposed to hit Main Street, I don't know, around 11:30 and down to Houston by noon or something. And it all got held up. So it was all like a half an hour later. But we lived in Oak Cliff and not very far from Dealey Plaza. We lived about maybe 10 minutes from Dealey Plaza. Fort Worth Avenue goes straight out, and there's Hampton Road that hits it right there. And that's where our house was. So she picked me up at Rosemont, and we went down. We decided that Dealey Plaza would have the fewest people there. So instead of fighting through, and they got about 8 or 9 people deep on Main Street. Clint Hill, the Secret Service man who jumped on the back, explained how he was so concerned because the president has said, I don't want you guys on the back of the car. So the car behind him was filled with Secret Service. And of course, down Main Street, everybody's hanging out of the buildings and waving. A nightmare for Secret Service. They're like, oh, and I can't even get on the car. So at one point on Main Street, there were so many people that the driver, knowing what he should do, moved the car over so there was more distance between the crowd and the president, but it meant there was less distance between Mrs. Kennedy and the crowd. And Clint was her Secret Service guy. So he got very concerned and he jumped up on the back of the car. Now, the back of the car has at the bottom it has a foot place for them to stand, and then it has a rail on it that you hung on to. You stood on that thing and hung on to the back of it. And so he got on the back step and crouched down and was holding on to it because he was trying not to disobey the president, but he was scared about his, he needed to be sure she was safe. So he crunched down on that, for a while, and then he got back in the other car because the crowd thinned out a little bit. Detail. You should at least go look at Clint Hill's oral history. It is fascinating. I mean, from his viewpoint, he was with her all the way to the White House. A lot of personal touching things happened. When they first got the president there in the East Room, there were 4 Marine guards, and he got a call that she and the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, wanted to come down and see the president. And so he said, yes, ma'am. And he said, Marines about face. They about face. Now, Marines leave the room. And she said, no, they don't need to do that. They don't need to leave the room. Just have them turn around. So they did. And she and, maybe Clint had already opened it. I don't know. And I can't tell you how it would have been okay to look at his head because it had exploded. And it to such an extent that now it's called the plume. This mass of brain and blood and tissue that just burst is called the plume now. And if you saw the plume, you knew exactly what had happened. I saw the plume, and it glistened a little bit in the sunlight. It was noon in Texas. And I said, Mom, someone did fireworks in the car, and the police are really, really mad. And she's like, oh, okay. And a lot of people thought it was fireworks. Some people thought it's like a car backfired. I'm telling you, down there in that part of downtown, it is an echo chamber. You can't hear, you don't know where anything came from. It sounds like it came down Elm, down Main Street,
On the
down
grassy
here.
knoll?
You just, well, the grassy knoll wouldn't echo,
Oh, I see.
but the echo in the buildings, you're like, where did that come from? Because there were just too many sounds bouncing back. So we went down there and we decided Dealey Plaza was the place. And we parked on Elm, just about a block up. There was no problem. There was a barricade on Houston Street. And I think at the end of Elm, and then on Houston, there were some barricades. They weren't paying a lot of attention to them. So, I mean, we walked through them, and we got to the corner, I'm sorry, we got to right here, and we were looking around trying to decide, where should we go, where should we go? Of course, I run all the way down here and go, well, this would be great, but maybe there'll be speeding up by then. Okay, so I'm up here, and we decided that, well, she wasn't very happy because I was in a skirt. But I got up on top of this thing, and it just turned out that it gave me a panoramic view. When they were coming down Main Street, I was 11, right? I run down here, look, it makes me run back. They're 4 blocks away, run down here. They're 2 blocks away, run back. I was running back and forth every 2 minutes to see where they were coming from. And one of the times I ran down here, a man fell down and started having a seizure. And I think it was over here, because this was blocked off too. So there were people. And 11, of course, being the leader of all human beings, I jumped down on the ground and started trying to take care of him. In the 6th grade, and I'm trying to take care of a guy having a seizure. So a policeman came over, and he helped me and so forth. And then I said, you've got to get him an ambulance. And as soon as I said it, I went, because if they sent an ambulance to this guy, what would happen to the parade coming by? They'd never let the president go by if there was an ambulance picking up somebody. So I thought, oh no, now they're gonna call. Well, they did call the ambulance, but it came, picked it up, and went back. They came and picked him up very quickly. And so I just walked out. And so finally, they were at the corner of Main and Houston. Finally got there. And so I stayed down on the end, watching, waiting, and then he came around. The other thing that's important is that there were maybe 20 people, 25 people on the street on the school book depository side of it, going down toward the triple underpass. There may be 20 people standing along that street. And there were, I'll stay over here.
That's fine.
I'll just stay here. Too much of a teacher. So we've got maybe 20 people along here, a little more. And we had people 1 person deep that pretty much went all the way along. And down here at the corner, they were standing in the street. And there was a little girl here, gosh, I've forgotten all their names. But she was taking stills, and her father was standing next to her taking film. And I'm going to say, when the car came around here, some people went running, around, a couple of kids especially, a little girl and somebody went running around. But, once it came past, most people, oh, that was fantastic. Okay, where's the car? You just, you'd seen the parade, the president was there, okay, let's go. And so mother was screaming, get down, you still have on a skirt. And I said, just let me watch him for every second I can, and so I just turned around, and then it happened. So my little delusion about if he just looks at me, he had come along here, I'm 4 feet higher than anyone else, screaming and waving. And he turns the corner, and I go, because Mrs. Kennedy was on my side. He was on the other side. I went, oh no, he's never going to see me. He's never going to look at me. But they were both very good about, first of all, they didn't just wave to the crowd. They would pick you out. They'd go, hi. And it was great. They were both good at it. And they'd look across, and she'd, do that to people, and he'd do that to people, and he just looked up and laughed and waved at me. Okay, guys, my life is gonna change. It's gonna be perfect. He looked at me, and I was floating in the air. I can't explain the emotions. It was like, somebody had broken me out of jail or something magical had just happened. God had just looked at me as far as my little 11 years was. And so I'm just like this, and then he turns the corner. And right here is about 20 seconds later. And the most incredible moment of my life lasted 20 seconds until the worst moment of my life. So I was in heaven, and I just turned to be sure I could watch all the rest of it, and I just turned and saw his head explode. I've asked the museum, and they think that of these 20 people, maybe 10 or 15 here, there were some people standing up on some of the cement stuff, but most of them had turned around to try and get down. So as far as along here, there really wasn't anybody there. There were a few people along here, but they couldn't have seen. The museum thinks 50 people were able to see the plume, were able to see that. And 50 years later, they would have to have been under 20 or 25. That means they'd be 75 today or 80. So of the 50 people who saw the plume, we don't know how many are still alive. And when you look at the people around there, they're older than 25. They're, except for the little kids that are running around.
Hmm.
So I can, if you want to take a second, show you on film where I was. Oh, can I get online?